call this regular Board of Supervisor meeting 7 o'clock to order. This is April 12th. First item is public comments. Now, folks have signed up to speak, and I have some of you on here. Public comments is not related to the project that you may have come to speak. We will have a public hearing for each individual one of those. So I will say what it is, and if you didn't make it on the sheet, you'll have an opportunity to speak. That's public comments. If you don't have any public comments, has anybody come today to speak about anything not related to any of the items on our agenda? Especially permanent church. Not seeing any. Where's the mobile home walk right there? Got it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and with open public comments. Is there anybody here to speak for public comments? Hearing none, we will close the public comments. We're now going to be going into public hearings. We will get a presentation. We'll ask some questions of staff, the applicant, and then we will go into the public hearing. And as it relates to the rules of the public hearing, you're given 3 minutes. Mr. Reed, can you be the timekeeper this time? All right. All right, Ms. Parr, your timekeeper. You will have 3 minutes to speak. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, please say who that group is. You will be given 5 minutes. I will once again say this again when we get to the public hearing. So, first item on the agenda is Special Use Permit 517, Antique Craft Art Gift Shop.
Thank you. This is a request for a special use permit for an antique craft or gift shop use for a hot glass studio and gallery on property zoned A1 agriculture. It's located on Rockfish Valley Highway in the North District. The property is 8.15 acres, owned by Min Martin and Anna Shapiro. The surveyor for the project is Saunders Surveys. Property is currently vacant aside from an existing barn. The applicant's requesting the special use permit to construct a hot glass studio with galleries. Activities feature live glass blowing demonstrations and a gallery featuring glass made on site, as well as work from other artists in a variety of mediums. The applicant anticipates to be open to the public 4 to 5 days a week during normal daytime hours, and their proposed barn structure is approximately 2,500 square feet. The area is residential and agricultural in nature. Zoning in the vicinity is A1, and there is floodplain located on the east side of the property, although no development is proposed in this area. If you're heading north on Route 151, this property is located on the east side just before you get to the brewing tree. The property is proposed to be accessed by a new entrance on Route 151, and the applicant will be required to have an entrance designed by their engineer and approved by VDOT. Well and septic permits will be required to be designed by an engineer and approved by the health department. If the land disturbance for the project will exceed 10,000 square feet, the erosion and sediment control plan will be required. For the comprehensive plan, this property is located in an area designated rural and farming. That promotes agricultural uses and compatible open space uses, discourages large-scale residential development, and any commercial development that would conflict with agricultural uses. It would permit small-scale industrial and service uses that complement agriculture. Public hearing was held at the Planning Commission's meeting on January 26th. There were no speakers. At their meeting on February 23rd, the Planning Commission voted 4-0 with 1 abstention to recommend approval of this application. There is a presentation that they provided that's in your packet, and they can present it for you tonight as well if you'd like to see it.
The applicant like to come forward? Yes, you can.
Is this okay?
That's fine.
Sorry.
All right, if you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Min Martin, currently at 603 Nettle Court, Charlottesville, Virginia.
Sir.
My name's Anna Shapiro, Saber Drive, 603 Naval Court.
And yeah, thank you for letting me present. I, for the last 20 years, have been a glass blower. And my current studio is in Williamsburg at the South River Complex, the old Compton factory. And I make a lot of stemware. So most of my business is through galleries across North America. Vases, more accessible things, glass weaponry and buds. My wife Anna is a textile artist in her 16 years and makes natural fiber shawls and dresses. And yeah. And yeah, since we met at an art show, we've always dreamed about owning a gallery, and we moved to the area 12 years ago. We've been very taken by Nelson. I've been driving up and down North 51 to finally find a place that we can make this happen. And this is the parcel Dylan referred to. Brood Tree is just north there. It's a lovely spot with rockfish on the east side there and a little creek on the south. And yeah, mostly we've got 3 young boys, and we've mostly just been doing this. But we would like to build a barn. And the barn would house there's a board plan. So kind of the center of the barn would be where the glass blowing would happen, and maybe a gallery around it. And we propose to make work there, and also be open to the public so people can come in and blow your own at Christmas time, or make a function in the fall, or take classes. My partner is actually an MFA glass blower, so he teaches at our current studio, so he would also do that. And we would sell our work and regional artist work, as well as some other friends from the national craft scene. Some other just sketches. And we have work that's under surveys, and this is the entrance they've proposed for us. And yeah, demonstration, participation, and retail. That's our oldest boy. Yeah. Is that enough of the synopsis, or any questions?
Anybody have any questions at this time? Hearing none, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, we are now going to open the public hearing for special use permit 517 Antique Craft R Gift Shop. I have nobody signed up on the list. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to this special use permit? Once again, to remind everyone of the rules, it is 3 minutes per individual, 5 minutes for a group. Once, twice, 3 times. We close the public hearing in relation to 517, special use permit. All right, board, at this time, do we have any questions for staff or the applicant? If not hearing anything, I'd like to get a motion.
I've got some questions for Dylan. So, this being an agricultural area, it's zoned for things that are compatible with agricultural zoning, correct?
I would agree with that.
Compatible with that. Currently, are there any craft shop, gift shops that are single standalone entities along 151 corridor that might? The reason I'm asking that is because I know that having a craft, retail store in that area arguably may not be compatible with an agricultural zoning. And if that's the case, we would be in a situation where if we had future applications that were similar, is this a precedent that would say that perhaps these these would not change the character of the neighborhood if there were other ones in the area? I'm kind of projecting something here, given the fact that we don't have a comprehensive plan currently or zoning that allows this without special use permit. And so I'm just opening this up to you to get your opinion on.
As far as existing antique craft and gift shops in the area, I'm not entirely sure. As I know that there are several shops like that in the corridor. I'm not sure what their zoning are off the top of my head on that. I know there are some B1 zoning pockets on the corridor that do have some retail. I'm not aware of any other craft type of gallery shops in the corridor.
Yeah, we have the antique mall farther south. But I was just curious because I don't know if this would open the door to more similar development, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that.
I think that when we do the comprehensive plan review, that'll tell us what areas of the corridor on 151 will be good for these service-oriented type uses. And we do have the service enterprise zoning, which is what that was intended for, however, not really put into effect as it was intended. So I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like, what areas are going to be, but I would argue that some areas of the corridor have already become mixed-use service-oriented. And as far as that agritourism industry, when people do visit in the area, it's another activity for them to do that we don't have much of. That type of experience.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is that it? All right, any other questions for staff? All right, if we could, currently is my position, I think this antique craft gift shop would be a great complement to the area potentially, but if we could get some actions from the board on Pathways Board. Motion to approve or motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I move that we approve special use permit 517 for antique craft and gift shop.
All right, we have a motion, do we have support? I good. We have a second from Mr. Park. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, if we could do a roll call vote.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to special use permit 406, Campground. Ms. Bishop?
This is a request for a special use permit for a campground use on property zone Naval Agriculture at 27 Redbud Lane. That's the corner of Redbud Lane and Honey Lodge Road. In the East District, the property is 1.9 acres owned by Daryl Mann. They are proposing to establish 16 RV campsites for rental purposes to members of the Silverleaf Hunt Club, to which they lease 6,500 acres of land to hunt on. According to the applicant, he's been utilizing the property for this purpose for approximately 10 years. He came to our office to apply for an electrical permit, which was the impetus for this application. The use is not legally non-conforming and would be required to secure the special use permit. There's a barn lodge structure on the property and porta-johns, which are used by the lodgers for restroom facilities. The plat provided by the applicant does not indicate specific sites. The request instead is for 16 unspecified RV sites on 2 acres. The area is residential and agricultural in nature. Zoning in the vicinity is all A1. There are no floodplains on this property. It's currently accessed from Redbud Lane. VDOT did a site visit at the property, and they indicated that the existing access from Redbud Lane, which is a non-state maintained road, is acceptable. and that the entrance along Hunting Lodge Road should be closed under a VDOT permit. Restroom facilities, like I stated, include several porta-johns as well as the restroom in the barn. The applicant is working with the health department. I received an email from them today from Mr. Mazurowski, and he indicated that Daryl Mann has submitted an application and that Tom Ike made a site visit and met with him to discuss health and safety requirements. They've discussed the situation. They've not issued a permit, but they feel confident that Mr. Mann will be able to meet the regulatory requirements for issuance of a campground permit for self-contained recreational vehicles. So a septic's not going to be required since they have other facilities to use, so they won't be dumping. The property is located in an area designated rural and farming. I've stated it before, but it promotes agricultural uses and compatible open space uses and discourages large-scale and commercial development. At their meeting on March 23rd, the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the application to the board with the following conditions. 1, that only 16 total RV sites are permitted. 2, that the site shall be utilized exclusively by members of the Silver Leaf Hunt Club. The site shall not be rented to lodgers that are not members of the hunt club. And 3, that a minor site plan be submitted that indicates the locations of the proposed sites that will be approved by all applicable agencies.
All right. Any questions for staff? All right, thank you. With that, Mr. Mann, would you like to say a couple things? Okay. All right. We'll move on to the public hearing. I open the special use permit 406 campground public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this special use permit today? Okay, not seeing, and there's nobody on the list, so if you want to speak, now's your chance. All right, hearing and seeing none, close special use permit 406 campgrounds public hearing.
Can I ask some questions?
We're getting to that. Yeah, so, Dylan? Are the questions for the applicant or the staff?
No, staff. So I was up there the other day, and, so the health department is going to ensure that they have ways to deal with their,
That's correct. They indicated they did a site visit and felt that they could come to a permitting.
so that will be issued if they do things that are necessary.
Correct.
Any other questions for Dylan?
Was there any mention from the health department about what I noticed on a site visit and what 2 different residents had contacted me about, which was that there was a camper parked by Hunting Lodge that was that had a pipe discharging directly into a ditch by the side of the road.
They did not mention that. They did not mention that.
Yeah. Because it was a concern to both of them, and I went up to take a look at it and noticed that yes, in fact, there was a camper that was doing that discharge.
Okay.
And I didn't know that there was a discharge, but the pipe was certainly, going down there. And I know that I know that it might be a tendency if the health department is able to maintain that that's not going to happen, or the applicant's able to make sure it doesn't happen. That's one thing, but certainly I would assume they don't have a permit to discharge, and
Right.
and it seems a little strange to approve something when there's activity going on that is certainly not compatible with health codes and such. So it's not really a question for you, it's a concern.
Well, it's against the law to discharge either gray water or wastewater into the environment. That's a reportable condition.
I can follow up with the health department this week and see if it's something that they address at their site visit, or Mr. Mann maybe could address it. If it was something that came up.
Is Mr. Mann?
Yes, Mr. Mann, you
Okay,
got
it would be
it?
good to hear.
Teresa Mann, 2365.
You gotta come forward, if you can.
Teresa Mann, 2365 Huntsville Lodge Road, Charlotte, Virginia, 299. It has been addressed, the man that owns that camper, the camper will be moved. And that will be taken care of. I discussed it with Darryl, and told him that was a problem.
Supposed to be moved where the.
And it has to be moved away from the barn side of the road anyway, the camper will be moved. And that's the only one that has a tight painting out of the camper.
Right. Will you have any any disposal facilities on site?
Well, they're not supposed to dump, but there will be portage parties out there, so.
From Vail. From Vail. From Vail.
They'll bring porta johns out there for the people, but that's the only camper that has a pipe hanging out of his camper, and I do not know why he gassed that. But he will be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay. I know, going back there on Redbud Lane, Hunting Lodge, Mr. Mann and some of the Leaf Hunting Club has been part of that community for many decades. And I know for a fact I've known those campers to be there for a good chunk of my life. And I at this time think, if they can conform to the proper regulatory needs, and the health department can address making sure that no gray water or solid effluent is being discharged into the environment, that all is being taken care of properly. I would hope to see this get approved with the conditions given by the Planning Commission, with the expectation that it cannot be anyone else except for Silverleaf Hunt Club. So that's my thoughts. What is the rest of the board's?
I concur.
Okay. If we could at this point get a motion of some sort. It is in my district, but it would be proper.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve special use permit 406 Campground on Redbud Lane and Hunting Lodge Road.
With, if you could add with the conditions
With conditions.
from the Planning Commission. Great. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
We have a second from Mr. Barton. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we can go and do a roll call vote.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Mann,
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mann. All right. Moving on into rezoning. All right. Rezoning A1 552 A1 to B1, consideration of rezoning application requesting county approval from A1 agriculture to B1 business.
This is a request to rezone property from A1 agricultural to B1 business to allow the existing veterinary clinic to complete construction of a second building and bring the use into compliance. Located at 8151 Thomas Nelson Highway in the East District, and the property is exactly 1 acre. It's owned by Livingston Herd Health. According to the applicant, the structure has been utilized as a veterinary clinic since the early 1970s. Because it's located within the A1 district where veterinary clinics require a special use permit, this is considered a non-conforming use. With the adoption of the revised non-conforming ordinance in March last year, it became prohibited to expand non-conforming use. The applicant would like to complete construction on the second proposed building, which is proposed as accessory storage to the vet clinic. It's adjoined by both A1 and B1 business zoning. The area is mixed use in nature with a combination of agricultural, residential, and commercial uses. Vito's Pizza and Grill adjoins the parcels to the east. There are no floodplains on it. Property is accessed by an existing entrance on Henry Hill Lane. Because there is no proposed increase in traffic, VDOT is not requiring any improvements, but requested that the entrance onto 29 from Henry Hill Lane be paved. Property is served by existing utilities and is in an area designated as mixed commercial on our future land use map, west of Route 29. This is a commercial center offering regional shopping and countywide services as well as multifamily housing near a primary highway, dependent on internal access and connectivity, so all stores and attractions may be reached without continued reliance on the primary highway. Just as a reminder, approval of rezoning requests should be based on one or more factors, including good zoning practice, public necessity, general welfare, and convenience. At their meeting on March 23rd, the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval of this application to the board, and there was one speaker at the public hearing in support.
Thank you, Dylan. Does the applicant wish to say anything?
I have nothing to add.
All right, well, we'll keep this brief. Thank you, Dylan. All right, we open up the hearing rezoning 553. Did I do it right? 552 A1 to B1. Rezoning here in Livingston. Anyone want to speak? Hearing nobody wants to speak, I close the public hearing in regards to rezoning 552 A1 to B1. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, I will say the veterinarian's been a great place in Livingston, and has taken care of lots of our animals probably, and they've been a great piece. Important that we continue to support them. So if we could get a motion to approve, that'd be great.
So,
Mr. Barton makes the motion to approve, with second, planning commission's whatever, second for Mr. Barton. With any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Amanda?
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Barton? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on into now rezoning number 553 B1 R1 2 and 2.
This is a request to rezone property from B1 business and R1 residential to M2 industrial to allow the existing sawmill to construct a new building and bring the use into compliance. At 3535 Patrick Henry Highway in the West District, property is 8.15 acres owned by BT Ramsey and Sons. David Collins was the surveyor for the property. According to the owner, the property's been in operation as a sawmill since the 1920s, and Ramsey's located here in 2008. Because it's located within the B1 district where sawmills are not permitted, this is considered a non-conforming use, very similar to the last application. So it's prohibited to expand non-conforming use. They're proposing to construct a new building that is 3,920 square feet. Subject parcel split zone B1 business with a buffer of R1 residential to the west. The property is adjoined by both B1 business and R1 residential. The area is mixed use in nature with a combination of uses, and there are no floodplains on this property. It's accessed by an existing entrance, and VDOT is requesting that the open access along Route 151 be channelized for public safety and roadway function in accordance with the VDOT permit. The installation of this new building will streamline their process. Served by existing utilities. In the Piney River area, it's designated in the future land use map as secondary light industrial. That combines both industrial uses and an activity center that support nearby industries within a walkable, clearly defined area. At their meeting, the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval of this application as well.
All right. Thanks, staff. Would the applicant, Ray or David, y'all want to come up and say anything? All right.
My name is Ray Ramsey, 30 Ramsey Mill Shipping Division.
I'm David Collins, land surveyor here in Nelson, near Village 4.
As you can see, we added a second mill, and the goal is to turn the mill and have all the lumber come out in this direction where the new building is going. So we won't be using Firehouse Road or 151 to move the material from one side of the mill to the other. We can do everything in-house and stay off the highway, because As you know, the highways are getting more busy. So that's the main goal of this project. Okay?
All right. Any questions for the applicant? 1 second. All right, hearing none, we're good. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
All right, I open up public hearing rezoning 553B1 R12 M2. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this application? All right, hearing none. I close the public hearing for rezoning 553B1 R12 M2. Does the board have any further questions for the applicant or staff? All right, I don't hear anything from board members of that. Do we have any motions? Approve as presented and with the conditions given to us by the planning commission. Do we have a motion to do that?
I move to approve RZ 553.
That's good enough. As the planning commission gave it to us. All right,
I'll second.
we have a second from Mr. Reed. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's go ahead and have a vote.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Great. You've done pretty good so far, 30 minutes. I know. Now we get to the. All right, moving on to special use permit 520 mobile home park. This time, Dylan.
This is a request for special use permit for a mobile home park use on property zoned A1 agriculture on Thomas Nelson Highway in the Central District, north of Livingston here, on the east side before you get to Route 6 on the west side. Property is 204.4 acres, under contract for purchase by Shimp Inc. Property is currently vacant. They're requesting this permit for a mobile home park. The site plan submitted by the applicant shows a configuration of 51 mobile homes. The applicant contract purchaser intends to maintain ownership of the park and rent the lots used a phased development approach and a resident investor community that he will expand on more in his presentation. A memo and narrative submitted by the applicant are attached with your report, which further detail the proposal. Should the special use permit be ultimately approved, a major site plan will be required to be submitted to the planning commission for review. There is residential and agricultural in nature. Zoning in the vicinity is A1 and R1. The Muddy Creek flows through this property, which is bounded by flood zone AE or the special floodplain district. An existing Ridgecrest Heights subdivision is located along Route 29, is zoned R1, the yellow. The property is also adjacent to Ridgecrest Baptist Church and 4 single-family dwellings. The rest of those lots are undeveloped. They also are non-conforming lots as well. The property is proposed to be accessed by a new entrance on Thomas Nelson Highway. The proposed entrance location has been relocated from the time of initial application from north of the church and existing dwellings to the south of the church. I did receive comments from VDOT regarding the new proposed entrance location yesterday. They reviewed it with their district traffic engineer. They have no issue with the relocation and the 200-foot taper. Left turn lanes for the adjoining medium crossovers, both north and south, are still requested to address U-turn movements. He also provided comments that if the property is only developed for 10 residential units, then those requirements are reduced for the taper and turn lanes. The new proposed entrance no longer follows the Atlantic Coast Pipeline easement, which was where the first proposed location was, to go through adjoining lots to the north of the property. According to the health department, the applicant is required to have an engineer design a decentralized wastewater system. The applicant's proposing a system of various drain fields and phases as the project develops. And they would also need a public waterworks well from the Office of Drinking Water. If land disturbance for the project is going to exceed 1 acre, then a stormwater management plan is required to be approved by DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. On the comp plan, it's located in an area designated rural and farming that promotes agricultural uses and compatible open space uses, discourages large-scale residential development and commercial development that conflicts with agricultural uses. It would permit small-scale industrial and service uses to complement agriculture. At their meeting on February 23rd, the Planning Commission first voted 2-3 to recommend denial, and that motion failed. They then voted 4-1 to recommend approval of this application to the board with the following conditions. 1, that the number of mobile home park sites be limited to 51. 2, an on-site supervisor is required. 3, the 35 acres as shown on the applicant's presentation dated February 23rd shall be reserved as open space. And 4, a maintenance plan is required to be submitted prior to final approval. And the applicant has a presentation for you this evening as well.
Thank you, Dylan. Mr. Shep?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Justin Shim. I'm the contract purchaser of this property, also the Shim engineer. Well, I have a presentation, and of course, a couple of you, which both Mr. Reed with the Planning Commission meeting, have heard all the discussion. I know some new neighbors here, so I'm going to go through this whole presentation to make sure everyone sees what we went over last time. Location of the property has been described as the 204 acres around Ridgecrest Baptist Church, essentially. And it backs up to Old Ridge Road, back of the property, but no development proposed in that area. So here's a blow-up of the concept plan. This has changed the Planning Commission that previously the entrance was going to come over here and go around behind these houses along the pipeline easement. But for various reasons, we've rerouted that to come over on the south side of the church there. So the entrance would be 29 before the driveway to the house adjacent to the church on the south. Folks leaving the site would come up, make a U-turn at the crossover, which we would add a left turn lane into, so you can safely make that maneuver around. The details are 51 units. This layout shows the screens for 35 acres of land devoted to this particular project. So we would reserve the space of the creek down there for recreational use for the people who live here.
That's green area?
The green area is essentially the development zone of this, which will all be reserved. Anything you see in green that doesn't have the houses on it would be preserved as open space or recreation space for folks who live in the community.
How far, the new entrance is to the south, right?
Correct. So there's
How
a
far
church.
is that from the house that's down? There's a house down there.
There is, yes. It's like it's the parsonage house. It's probably, the entrance is probably 100 feet off the property line of that house, headed south. It's a function of really where you can get an entrance in to meet VDOT criteria, essentially. And further down, there's a large slope, and there's issues getting a taper in there to get people off the road safely. There's a shoulder, if you're driving up the road, there's a shoulder there that you see, and you would enter in there in the woods before the clearing where the house is. So quick pictures, these are a little old now, back when there was snow on the ground, but gives you an idea. The Muddy Creek area is really a very nice natural space that I think would be great for people who live there to have access to. One of the themes you'll hear in this presentation is that it's important to me to give folks who can't afford, what I have, many have, as far as their own large property, space for kids to play, sort of similar opportunities. So I think there's an opportunity here to have a community that's affordable, but also have a spot for kids to go play in the woods, play in the creek. That's kind of part of Nelson County, and I think it's something that's important to not overlook we think about how we do housing development, especially people who don't still have means to afford their own large property. Couple details relative to really why I've come around to this point with the mobile home park. I think, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about this. I think it wouldn't have been needed to get the affordability. But such the increases in cost that achieving housing for folks who don't make, $100,000 a year is very difficult. To mention statistics, while the housing values in Nelson County went up from 2010 when they mean values, and the incomes went up in Nelson as a whole, the Livingston census area, which this is part of, actually decreased. So, and we've seen this. We all know that around, like in Livingston, this area, there are not necessarily the high-paying jobs, people commuting to Charlottesville, had the incomes to afford what housing prices have come around here. In Nelson County, this is for the local realtors report, the median house price in 2020, was $405,000. So that is really unattainable for somebody who makes $60,000 a year, which many people do. The mobile home park is something that is, over time, been maligned a bit. There have been bad owners who have run them poorly. There have been other challenges, but is a moving forward as a way to fight housing costs and give folks a neighborhood they can live in. I think it's a good solution. I know there's a little bit complaining because we got some new numbers. For example, one can buy a new mobile home for as little as $60,000, so you have to pay to set it up. You can then rent a mobile home pad for around $400 a month. So that opens up a much different sort of price point for folks than the typical what's in the housing stock around here. Likewise, you can buy a used mobile home for $20,000, a little more. You have to pay to move it. But I would be open to that. There's minimum requirements of quality in the neighborhood. That's another way for folks to get into an affordable house in Nelson County. Mobile home park features, the lot size are very much like the size of the Belmont lot in Charlottesville. It's 50 by 120. You have your own yard, you have your own garden, your own deck, your own space to call home. That's a big plus. And also the folks who have lived in these long term, and there's some articles out there, if you all read the Charlottesville Tomorrow story about mobile home park that's closed up on 29 North. But the folks there have a lot to say about how they've been in their community for 20, 30 years. They lived there. And they became neighbors and they have a sense of community as folks in the subdivision would. They just kind of mobile home. And I think that's it's a good thing to provide that opportunity. One of the things I want to try to help both really provide opportunity for folks in this community and to help ensure that it's kept up well is to offer a resident investor community. Quickly, what this does is it allows the folks who live there to either purchase a share or to rent. So a certain number of shares are available. If you have, say, $30,000, you can buy your spot. And you own a share of the corporation that has that, and then later on, if you wish to move, you can sell it for the market price. So rather than somebody renting the whole time, if they have the means to purchase that, then they simply have that asset, and 20 years later, they could sell it, maybe it's worth $50,000, $60,000. And so they've actually accumulated some wealth themselves in this scenario. It also would provide people who do this will help me kind of keep an eye on things, right? When you're invested in the community, even if it's $30,000, a lot of money to many people. That's where they're going to say, they'll be on the lookout for things going on, make sure things are kept clean. They'll care. And that's an important part of it. That'll help maintain the quality of work. The comp plan brief, this is a planning commission meeting, and the sort of interesting thing is there really is no designated area in all of Nelson County for this sort of use. And I think the reality is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people really started to phase out the mobile home parks. They weren't desired, people wanted to get rid of them, and zoning ordinances and comprehensive plans sort of shifted that way. So look, we don't want these things. Circling back, 30 years later, the cost of land and housing has outpaced the level of income such that we can't ignore this any further as a means of housing. And so while I understand Congress doesn't call for this specifically in this location, it doesn't call for anywhere. And you have to ask the question, well, does that mean we can't have some form of affordable housing somewhere? So I think this is a good spot for this. few notes about that. The scale was asked about. The 51 comes from the cost of all the turn lanes on 29. We can't do a small project here because it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense to build those turn lanes. The unit type, why mobile home park, and why can we not build a house for folks? And I mentioned earlier, 2016, I said, I'll do this. I can build some nice little bungalows for $100,000 a pop, rent them to people at a very affordable rate, and it would be a great little neighborhood. I can't do that anymore. The little bungalow is now $160,000, $200,000 before you put any site work into it. The statistics from the census show the construction cost, 23% increase in 2 years, in 2021. But over the long term, 2012-21, 64% increase. And so that's your sticks, bricks, labor. I think it's probably, I'm sure it's higher now. I've been fighting construction this year. So for these reasons, we really can't build affordable housing. You don't need some kind of manufactured modular housing to achieve. Location I mentioned is very convenient in the county, that you go to Charlottesville, you go to Lynchburg, Livingston is obviously very close by, Waynesboro. Those who live in the county and work some of the county and surrounding areas have a convenient location to get in and out. Right on 29, we have adequate traffic infrastructure for folks. One more bit of information, just for reference. These are I took these off the advertised salaries on the county website today. And 36,000, 51,000 teacher, 20,000 for a clerk, 47,000 as a specialist with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. These are the sort of wages that are out there, people are earning. And we have to provide some housing for them somehow. And doing it with traditional means is just really not attainable at this moment in time. So, to conclude, we have to find a means to provide housing for folks that can work within their budgets. I think this park investor opportunity will be a way that people who historically haven't been able to sort of set anchor somewhere will be able to buy in and take ownership of that, and it'll be good for them and good for the community. As I mentioned, wages have not and seem to continue not to keep up with the cost of housing. It's going to continue to problem. And a park versus, an mobile home here in the countryside, it gives folks a community where you live next door to someone for 10, 15 years, and they're your neighbors and friends, and they look after each other. Right? I think that's an opportunity missed when we have sort of scattered housing throughout the community. So I know it was a bunch. I'm happy to answer questions, of course, and I'm sure the public will have some questions. So I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, before we go to the public hearing, do we have any quick questions?
Well, I have some questions, but I'd rather get the public.
Sure.
First.
All right, that's reasonable. You'll be in the public hearing. Yeah. All right, so no other questions for the applicant or there from this board? Moving on. All right, so we actually have folks who signed up on this one, so we'll just say the rules again. You will have 3 minutes to speak, 5 minutes if you represent a group. Please say what that group is. Please state your name and address for the record. How this works is when you have questions, generally speaking, the board will potentially ask those of the applicant if one of the board members so chooses. Please do not interact with the crowd. You address the board. Do not address the applicant or staff. At that time, we will be unprepared. We do not answer questions. We as the board will answer questions and ask questions as appropriate. All right. So with that being said, we have a few people who signed up, and if there's more people who didn't have a chance to sign up, you will have an opportunity to speak after the first 3, which that's all we have here for the moment. So, as far as your timekeeper, he will hold up a sign showing the 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds, and then when he holds stop, that's a stop. I may give you a couple seconds to finish your thought, but when I see it, I'm gonna say 30 seconds and stop, all right? All right, first one on the list is Mr. Larry Shelton.
My name is Larry Shelton, and I own property at 2831 State Ridge Road, and this property has been in my family for generations. Unfortunately, my property does border the said property in questions here. I'm just going to go through some of these questions I had written down. don't hear very well, so I don't know what all's been brought up, so. One of the questions is, what is or does the county have a standard for maintaining, mobile home park? And that would be as far as the aesthetics and all that, they're gonna have a homeowners association there, who's gonna be responsible for all that? And like I say, who is gonna oversee it and enforce the standards? Is the county gonna do that? I understand there's wetlands in that area. Has there or will there be a study done to see what effect the park will have? And then what qualification, certification does the county have to address the water quality? Has there or will there be a study done on the effects of the sewage from the park? Is this going to be some sort of a community septic tank, drain field? I'm curious to see what effect that would have on the creeks and as far as the Rockfish River itself. Has there or will there be a study done on the effects of the 51 additional homes for the water source? Are we talking also another community well, so to speak, or are we now talking 51 additional wells to be drilled out there? What kind of impact is that going to have on the homes already there, and especially the ones downstream from this development? What effects it's going to have on the wetlands and the creeks, and also on the rockfish? And I see that has they done a traffic study on this for 29? Any kind of a traffic plan? I see where they're talking, they want to go down and make a U-turn. I think everybody's familiar with that area. That's a nasty place right here on top of that hill for trucks and vehicles altogether. Has VDOT been notified as to the plan for the ingress and egress from the community here? There again, I'm curious as to is there any kind of plan laid out for the trash? Are they going to have individual trash service, or are they going to be going to the recycling centers and all? And another question would be, is if something like this would go through, is this going to open the door for more for the community? And they show a recreation area up there. I think at some point, recreation area may become a free fall for the adjoining farms and property around it. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. All right. We got Mr. Thomas Yearman. Did I say it right?
No. Not many people do. Thomas Iron.
Tom. All right, Ironman. Thank you, sir.
I'm at 2801 State Bridge. Although I'm not directly adjoining the site property. I'm one property removed on the other side of Larry Shelton. I can understand someone's interest in providing affordable housing to folks in this county. I will say that my wife and I looked long and hard for a place to retire. And either of us couldn't imagine retiring here, but we did. We've been here about 7 years. Wouldn't want anything to change, but we know progress getting rid of that. I do have some concerns. City County has a comprehensive plan, and this does not seem to fit into that comprehensive plan. I would hope that the county would review the comprehensive plan to see if this makes sense before they make a motion to approve. I do have concerns about covenants. What's going to keep this community from going downhill? None of us want property values to go down. We certainly want good neighbors. So I really am concerned how the covenants would be imposed. Would they be legally binding? Would they be strict enough that it doesn't become a problem? The new entrance concerns me. Actually, it looks like an entrance and an exit, if I understand it correctly, looking at the plat, in the U-turn on that hill. I just think that is potential for disaster. I've heard you talk about development in phases. What does that mean? I heard the term phases twice. So I don't know what the phases of development would look like. Does that mean potentially add more homes from home sites, expand more towards Mud Creek, or come across Mud Creek over towards Redbud? I'd like to understand that.
30 seconds.
And then, of course, water, sewer, trash. I really need to understand how that's going to be taken care of. Being downhill from there, I don't want any problems with sewage, and I certainly don't need Naval to go driving because they put 51 wells up. I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Tanya Bradley?
Yes. Hello, I'm Tanya Bradley, and I've spoken with several of you all prior. I'm highly opposed to this particular trailer park. When several of the reasons that others have spoken about, as well as it's a violation of deed, okay? One of the biggest things with regards to the road that was proposed, that is a very dangerous area coming up that hill. People travel at a significant rate of speed. There's been several accidents. My own cousin was even killed in that area. They are behind, in that same exact area that they're talking about, and went in the gully down there. So you have to be very careful with any kind of proposals about how you're going to get the trailers in there, how this is going to happen, how this is going to affect the residents that are there. I live at 14834 Thomas Nelson Highway. So this would affect me specifically, okay? Number one, it's right behind the church. My whole family is buried in the church. I buried my father next to my mother on November 13th, 2021. My whole family, grandparents, everybody's in that church. How's this going to violate the sanctity of the church? That's one of my biggest and main things that is a bothersome to me, as well as the trash issue, the road issue, the safety there, and the wells that they were talking about. Are we talking about drilling a public waterworks system? I have vast concerns about this. I just finished fighting the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and now I'm having to fight this, okay? I have destruction from the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. The felling of the trees knocked kitchen cabinets off of my walls, okay? They wouldn't pay for it, of course, because they deny it. So when you have these big projects going in, you have homeowners that are there that are going to be affected by this. Whether it's, number one, it affects your well water, number two, it affects your sewer. So I'm concerned about how homeowners will be compensated with regards to damages that are done, okay? Now specifically related to my next point with regards to the deed, I have specific information from the WL Bridgewater, and this was, okay, 1959. One of the things, there will be no nuisances, shall be maintained on any lot. There shall be no temporary living quarters, no trailers shall be erected or kept or maintained on any lot. I expect for my deed to be upheld and maintained. That is for every single person along this Ridgecrest Baptist Heights, for this original subdivision. I expect for the sanctity of the church to be maintained, and I expect for my property value to be maintained. And someone cannot tell me that a trailer does not depreciate in value and that it will decrease my property value. Thank you.
All right, so we have gotten through those who have put their names on the list. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If you've already, have you spoken yet? Okay, come. Yeah, we'll let him go, then you'll go after that. You're good. 3 minutes. Yes. State your name.
Tim Olsru, ALSRUHB, 2831 Stagebridge Road. This property adjoins the property. Just a couple quick questions. I appreciate the need for low-interest housing in the county, but you're talking about a subdivision of 51 homes, whether they're trailers or houses, in the rural zone. Are you setting the precedent? What's the zoning going on here, guys? What are you thinking about? That's a lot of people using a lot of water and a lot of traffic in the rural area. It's just not in the plan. And if you do this, are you gonna have to approve one across the street or down the street? Where's it stop? What are you thinking about on how to control this? And I appreciate Mr. Shemp's idea of the equity ownership plan.
If you could address the board.
Oh, okay, yeah, I appreciate his plan, but when he just said he's gonna allow trailers in there that cost $20,000, how many people can afford a $30,000 share? So is there any minimum number of shareholders you have to put into the community, which would be a good idea to say it's gotta be 51% or something? You got people who have, enough people have equity in there to make sure that the standards are kept. Thank you very much.
All right, and you start in the back.
John Silverman, 1541 Old Ridge Road. I live at the end of Old Ridge Road, right above Parsons' house. Kind of a question, I'm confused a little bit by the letter that was sent out. Says the subject property is 204.4 acres. That is being, the special use permits for. Now, I was here for the first presentation of the 5 acres, or whatever it is that the mobile homes are going to be on. But is there something that clarifies that, makes that certain, and it's not the remaining part of the 204 acres that the special permit is used for?
We don't answer questions. We will ask questions of our staff and the applicant.
Yeah, that's my concern, is that it's a little more specific. That this is not going to encroach into the remaining of the 204 acres.
Okay. All right. Anyone else wish to speak? All right. Not seeing or hearing anyone else. Well, we're gonna close the public hearing. We close the public hearing. Now at this time, we have questions of staff and the applicant.
I have some questions for the applicant.
We do not take any questions from the public at this time.
Your decision to embark on this project.
If you could speak into the microphone, because remember we
Oh,
got
yeah.
yelled at earlier.
That's it. Your decision to embark on this project had to do with market considerations, that you saw there was really no way for a working person, a person who works, maybe his spouse works too, to afford a house in Nelson County.
That's largely, a lot of my perspective on this sort of work is driven by, we acquired the apartment complex in Afton in 2017. And we have several tenants there who they work as, one guy works the maintenance guy at Stonefield, and his wife has a job, she babysits. And they said, oh, we're saving up to buy our own house. Well, 4 years later, they're no closer, they're further. And they are not going to be able to acquire land and build like a traditional house. At the rate, so those incomes are growing versus the rate of construction costs.
So your answer to the question is, people in this country who work can afford to, we used to call it a starter house. I don't know if some of the old guys remember. After World War II with FHA, they came in, you bought a small house and expected it to maintain its value and increase in value. And then maybe later you'd buy a bigger house. That is no longer plausible in the America or Nelson County of today. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's pretty accurate, yeah. In America of the day, our housing condition, the basically growth of wages compared to the growth of housing costs.
So as a builder, The cost of these houses, how do you account for it? Why the working man can no longer afford to buy a house? Is it the cost of labor?
It's everything, labor, it's materials. I'll give you an example. I built my house in Afton in 2016. I paid $7 a sheet for OSB board. It was $47 today, it was like $55 yesterday.
All right, well,
Two by
stop
four,
there.
10
Stop
times.
there. How do you account for that enormous increase in the materials for building a house?
Oh, that's there's a lot of factors that play among that I think none of us have any control over. There's lumber and stuff is like a global market now, right? We post tariffs on Canada, the price goes up. There's shortages of resin needed for this, all the engineered wood, the price goes up.
What about the cost of labor?
Yeah, that too has gone up, yeah.
But see, that's what doesn't make sense to me. If people aren't making too much money and they can't afford to buy a house, how do you account for that?
Well, builders, for example, the carpenter might be making $35, $40 an hour right now, but the fellow who works the subway is not, right? So there are trades, like I tell people all the time, you want to right now start a good career? Go out and become an
You
electrician.
mean if we started building houses and paid carpenters $35 or $40 an hour, they could afford a house?
The carpenter can, but not the guy who works at Food Line.
You're a smart guy. I know you're a smart guy. Have you thought about ways to figure out how to get it so people who live in this country can afford to buy a house? What could be done as a builder to help you build a house that a person will know will increase in value in his lifetime?
Well,
you must have thought about this. Yeah, I mean, you're a builder, right?
We went down a path. The way to do this, I ran for politics once, and that was a bad idea. It's really honestly, it's the politicians who get involved in those sort of things. I have to respond.
Do the politicians sell labor? I mean,
You gotta get to questions about the
Focus on
application. The project we're talking.
We are focusing, we're focusing on the reason for this project is because there is no affordable housing in Nelson County for the people who work in these places, certain the service industry. There's no, we applaud the fact that we have the service industry, but they can't afford to buy a house. Now, what I'm thinking about is, I'm just thinking, as your representative should be thinking to solve problems, the job of people in government to solve problems. What could be done to help with this?
What is it really thinking? I don't think the Nelson County Board of Supervisors has other than raising you could raise the wages of all your employees. But otherwise, there's a lot of fundamental market issues out there in the economy that dictate.
Well, let's not, I realize that.
We gotta rein this in. We gotta rein this in.
Excuse me.
Mr. Barton, be respectful of this board's time too.
I'm respectful of everyone's time. If they want me to shut up, I will shut up.
Oh.
But I'm trying to solve a problem of housing in a place. For instance, if you as a person who was building houses could afford, if the person had health care, could you give them more money to work for you? If you would have to pay for the health care, could you do that? Is that possible? Is that plausible? Look, I'm sorry to waste your time. I know how valuable
Your conversation, Mr. Barton, is not about this project. It's inappropriate conversation for right now. It's a good conversation for us to have, but not at this moment.
The question here.
This is about a project application and an application for rezoning, Mr. Barton.
That he is building these, or he's having these, trailers come in, which are not gonna help people to buy houses in the long run because they're not probably gonna increase in value. And so that's really the issue, is low cost housing in Nelson County. It's not about whatever you say it's about. That's the problem I have, because I don't know whether, people come in the houses that you're talking about, whether in the long run, they will benefit. And you raised that question yourself.
That's why, just about the project, that's why I propose a sort of opportunity for people to invest in, because historically, the only person who makes the money off the investment is the mobile home park owner, right? In my model, there's opportunity for folks who are in.
Look,
Mr. Barton,
Excuse me.
no, excuse you. This board has rules. This board has a standard. And you have monopolized on the entire debate. Not related to the application.
What rules are you talking about?
I am the chair. I set the rules now. You got 1 minute. All right, finish your thoughts.
All right,
1 minute.
1 minute.
Go.
Problems of housing are real, and we need to deal with those problems. Whether or not a mobile home will help in solving this problem, I don't know. And I think probably not. So I can't support something that will not benefit the people that are in the homes. I mean, I sympathize with them, empathize. I live in a 720 foot
37.
house. So I know what it's like to live in a small place.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barton. Anyone else wish to speak or ask, please, pointed questions?
I have a question. I'm assuming that the density of 51 mobile homes is in order to make the project cost effective.
Effectively, to get the turn lanes on 29 is $300,000 to $400,000, and that's just, you can't swing that to 10 units basically, or 20 units, you have to go to like 40, 50 to make that viable.
Okay. So, what do you project the occupancy would be? I mean, you've probably done a business model. What would you assume the occupancy would be after the first 12 months, for instance?
Oh, 12 months, I would probably just start out with a 10, and then when you get those rented off and do 10 more, I put in the turn lanes at that point. At that point, I really would make no money until I got, the next 10 or 15 or 20. Unless the investors, people come in who pay the shares, that money can go towards the turn lane essentially.
Would all of the sites be of equal cost?
Yes, yeah, I think so. It should be all equal.
All right.
Okay. There's a question about water. Speak to me of water.
Sure. There was a number, actually, I appreciate the neighbors had a number of very reasonable questions. I'm happy to answer all of it. I'll start with your questions. You guys asked me stuff. So water, this situation, we have a community well, probably 2 or 3 of them. And then the units would all share that well. Context, we have the 14 units we have over in Afton, we have 2 wells they share. And so typically speaking, we do something like that here. Now, the nice thing about this property is that the creek forms a geological divide between anybody on the other side of it and itself. So when we drill wells on our side, there's no sort of groundwater movement across that creek. For a watershed, we're trapped in basically by that. I'm also not particularly worried about waters because of that, like drilling around that creek, if I have a geologist go out there and find the right veins off that, there should be plenty of water. I could also get a withdrawal permit from that creek, especially as a small development. Not to do that, but there's ample water on the site, and the geology of it basically separates us from the neighbors on the other side of the creek.
So you wouldn't have any additional water storage other than the wells that you would have and the flow rates?
It depends. If for some reason the flow rates were not high enough to do a storage tank, but I think I don't anticipate that. Ultimately, let's say, for example, if we go out there and I drill 3 wells, the health department says, well, we're worried about your supply, I might have to have fewer units potentially. That would be dictated by them ultimately. The risk, I think, is very low, but that's how the permit process works. I demonstrate adequate water supply for each unit. The site plan process.
Okay, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Would there be anything that would prevent someone from parking an Airstream or an RV and having that as part of the unit?
That is probably a better question for Dylan, but I believe, certainly in my rules and regulations, that's not permitted. I don't know if it's zoning wise. I think they're a separate item. A manufactured home, mobile home is a very specific thing, it has to be set up on kind of foundation, it can't be just rolled in and left there for a month. But maybe the correct answer, but maybe confirm that, Dylan. Thank you.
One would be HUD code, the other would be DMV. So RV is dictated by DMV standards, whereas the manufactured home is by HUD standards. So you couldn't bring in a DMV regulated piece, then they would turn into a campground.
Yeah.
So while you're up here, you mentioned the 10 and the 20 and going on. Would that address the question that came up earlier about the concern of phases? What would prevent you from, is it 51 is phase 1 and then another 50 is phase 2? Or is it 10 is phase 1 and then another,
Right.
Yeah, you said phases.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that, that was a very reasonable question that was asked, and yes, the maximum phase is 51, that's the 100% phase. I would work to that slowly, 10, 20, 30, as folks moved in, basically.
Also, was a question brought up, what assurances are there that it's this parcel and not the other 195 acres?
So I think that the special use permit conditions were if it's not worded this way, it should be, that the development would be per this concept plan. There was a reference to the open space area. And I think we submitted a minor site plan that shows, the large sheet, you saw that, which shows the same thing in context of the whole property. So it's my expectation that I would not be permitted to put a mobile home anywhere but the location shown on this map.
That'd be correct, okay. Gotcha. And then last but not least, and this, you probably aren't the person to ask this, do you know anything about the concern of the deed issue?
I do know that one, because I've
Okay.
obviously researched the title.
Okay.
And the title in question affects the deed affects the 20 lots, or 20, more than that, sorry, it's 34 lots and flats, the small lots at the top one.
Yeah.
The owner of the property subdivided all those and attached a covenant restriction to those lots only. It does not apply to the 194 acres residue, whatever it is.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none. Dylan, I have a few questions real quick. Just a few questions. You said you did have correspondence with VDOT with the general concept of it being on the south side, south of the church. And they said that's
Justin Ship presented VDOT a new entrance location for consideration. Having reviewed this option with our district traffic engineer, VDOT has no issue with the relocation and proposed 200-foot taper. Left turn lanes for the adjoining medium crossovers north and south are still requested to address the U-turn movements generated by the development, but may be reduced to 100-foot taper and 100-foot turn lane. If the property is only developed for 10 residential units, then the median turn lanes and tapers will not be required.
all right. And you had general conversations with Nelson County Health Department, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. I do think one thing, this is just a general statement, I think at some point, if you get to a certain unit, you get to the Department of Drinking Water, if you get to 20 or something, so that's when he may have to do a storage containment, but that remains to be seen until Health Department.
Yeah, that's the Office of Drinking Water.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then the sewage will be addressed by the Health Department.
Gotcha. All right. I don't have any further questions for staff or the applicant. Does anyone else have questions for Dylan or any comments you want to make at this time?
Just looking through some notes.
That's not open to the public, correct?
We do not interact with the crowd at this time.
Pardon, I'm sorry.
We only interact with the board and staff.
I mean, I'll just reiterate the conditions that the planning commission proposed, that the sites are limited to 51 and on-site supervisors required. I know in discussions with Mr. Schimpf, they had talked about constructing a single-family dwelling for the supervisor to live in, who will maintain all of his projects. He also has 2 other housing developments that have been approved by the board in the past. One is the Anderson store was approved by special use permit. for 4 units. That is under a building permit. There's no recent activity on it. And then he also got approved for a rezoning application for Rockfish Apartments. I think he's working on the financing for that. Other conditions Planning Commission recommended was that the 35 acres be reserved as open space and that a maintenance plan be submitted prior to final approval.
Got it. All right. Any other questions for Dylan at this time? Hearing none. Board, let's get your thoughts and get some ideas on motions. Now, I will say this, I think it's important, in the event that there is a split vote. So, and staff, please correct me, if there is a motion for the affirmative and the result ends up being 2-2, then the motion does not pass, but it does not fail. You then have to have a motion to deny, and you'd have to have 3-1 in order for it to be denied or affirmed.
I don't think you have to have a second motion.
Yes, but you could have a following motion to continue this to another meeting if there's a failed motion. That's my, what do you think, Mr. Reed?
I'm not sure about that, but if it was still 2-2, the motion would of course fail again.
That initial motion. I'm just trying to see if that in the back end that there became, since there would be no consensus, that there could be a motion to continue when we have a fifth board member.
You could do that now.
Right, or that could happen this time. So, all right, board, what do you think?
Well, I've got some additional comments that I would like to make, and that has to do with the density. There are aspects of this project that I think are positive and admirable, but the density is really a concern to me. And you know, if the density at 51 is what's required in order to make this cost effective in this location with that, on this piece of property with those arrangements with VDOT that would be necessary, I would question if this is the right place for that, because you know, the density proposed here, you know, is about you know, between, you know, about almost three times the density of the adjoining single-family housing lots up there, and that's a concern to me, because you know, whereas the density of the previous campground that we just approved by either rezone special use, yeah, but you know, this is a very different situation than that. So that's a concern.
All right, Mr. Barton, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you said I want to, his motives, I have nothing against his motives. I can understand he's, you know, he's responding to what is needed in Nelson County. I just don't think that it will, in the long run, be beneficial for the people who live there. Because trailer parks, I would love, I mean, I live in a very small house. I would love to think that this would be a place in which children would run in the streets and everybody would be happy, but that is not what has happened.
All right. Mr. Barr?
Well, I appreciate what you say, Mr. Barton, about, you know, in a perfect world, but not everybody can afford to buy a piece of land to build a house on, whether it's a 700 square foot house or a 4,000 square foot house. I think there is a lot to be said about the pride of ownership, especially in a land like this where people could have a stake in it with the shares. I think it's interesting that we bring up the density issue when we just 30 minutes ago approved 10 campers on a tiny piece of land. And I don't know, I think that kind of gives us even more reason to approve this. But I'm voting yes for this, so that's all I have to say.
Well, I've had the great pleasure of serving on the regional housing partnership, so perspective is always exciting. And of course, the perspective that's been shared by the board is not inconsistent across the Commonwealth sometimes. You know, you hear the arguments on both sides of it. You know, how is it that you can have affordable housing, and how is it that, what is the appropriate place? And more often than not, the struggle is always comes down to how to make something affordable in this environment. And that is near, you know, the definition that's been quantified, what the median income is very difficult. We all know that. We all know the teachers. We all know that. They have to live in Amherst County, Appomattox County, you know, in order to have a place to live. Question always comes down to is where is the appropriate place? I've found that if you put it near an area that's meant for high density, folks usually might not like it. And if you put it somewhere in the middle of nowhere, folks might not like it. And you're going to get that perspective no matter which way you look at it. As I look at this, you know, you can't have the word affordable without the word density. You know, that is a fact. How it is that you can make the acquisition of land for someone and then have the ability to have the home ownership is a unique situation. County doesn't have any good answers of how to answer that. We don't. And we don't have the pockets to pay for it either. So you do look to government entities such as housing authorities, developers, and whatnot to try to fill in those blanks. And it's important for us to make sure our zoning and our comprehensive plan, and I'm going to say this, aggressively looks at how to promote density for these types of projects in our county. Kind you will not get an opportunity for it. Generally speaking, I am supportive of this. And as I kind of suspected, this could potentially be the 2-2 scenario. So I would ask for guidance from the board as to what kind of motion we deem appropriate, obviously with Mr. Harvey's absence. You know, do we want to take that into consideration? Or would we like to go ahead and make a motion today? So again, if there is a motion to affirm, the affirm motion fails, but there'd have to be a motion to deny or continue. It's my perspective. You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Dylan, what has been your experience?
On what?
If there's a 2-2 vote on a denial.
I'm not sure I've dealt with that here.
I know, it's exciting.
My understanding is that
if the affirmative
is that if you make a motion and it's a tie vote, then the motion fails.
Correct. Whether that's an affirmative or a denial.
Whatever the motion
that's
is.
But the follow-up question to that is, what happens to the special use permit? The motion fails, but does the special use permit then completely fail, or is it in limbo until it's brought up?
The permit fails under that motion.
Completely?
Completely. And I wonder, you know, sorry, I'm not sure I'm fighting this game, but why would after a motion to approve be denied, then make a motion to deny?
Well, if
it's not denied, it's just not approved.
If there is a motion to deny and that motion in essence failed because of a tied vote, that motion failed.
Right, but it's already failed, why would you do that motion?
So,
but in this case, technically neither motion failed, they just failed to get approved. And then they die. There's a difference between a motion dying on the table and the motion passing failed.
Don't incorrect me, but if the motion fails and the permit application is denied, the applicant has to wait a year. They can come back. I would, if I may just a comment, I would ask the board to consider, what is really the economic benefit to the county of this proposal?
Okay.
To me, the economic benefit is to the people that have a place to live, not to the county itself.
I have pretty extensive experience with this in 2 other jurisdictions, and I don't mean to bias the board, but the incidents of law enforcement at these locations, the incidents of social services demands at these locations. Yeah.
I mean, the reality is this demographic is the ones who can't afford to sustain their school contribution.
But
Yeah,
the
that's-
likelihood is, person gets a job on Aqua Alley, might rent these places
Right.
because they have a place to live.
Right.
I mean, I want a home for people in Nelson County, I want them to be home. And I want the people who are involved in building homes to think about it. And, you know, I always want you to listen to me when I talk about education. I'm willing to listen to you when you're talking about building homes, but you need to have a plan.
Is the applicant volunteering something?
Can I approach?
Yes, for 1 second.
One second, yeah. The two possibilities here. It sounds like Mr. Reed is not comfortable with the units proposed. The special use permit, you could propose a lower number if you like. I don't like that, then the project may go away, but that is your discretion. Alternatively, we can defer it. And it sounds like perhaps adjustment to the plan or other adjustments might be a more decisive point rather than 2-2. So I'd be open to either, but it would be deferred and just get some more detail, but that's not uncommon.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
You know, I wish you guys would think about economic incentives that we might do as a board to make it a viable option. You know, some sort of, I mean, tax breaks.
I'm gonna bring you to the RHP meeting next.
What?
I'm gonna drag you to my next meeting. You ride with me. All right, so here's what we're gonna be looking at doing. Does the board want to continue this?
I think we need to. We have continued items for discussion much less controversial than this because we didn't have all 5 board members in attendance. I think this one certainly rises to and exceeds that threshold. That if we're not gonna, things that we have delayed in the past until all 5 of us were present, I certainly think this one qualifies for something. And I think the 4 of us need to do a little more review and because, you know, Ernie, you bring up a good point about the density, you know, that, and the applicant has brought up a potential solution. So I don't think the 4 of us are ready. Well, I think one of us is pretty much ready. But I think we all
want to do. I mean,
I think we all could benefit from taking a step back.
All right, Mr. Barton, do you feel okay with continuing this meeting? Just kind of, or the special use permit?
I thought you were in control of the meeting. You were
No, just when you're talking.
You said I had a stroke, but you interrupted me. When I had a stroke, I'm gonna go on.
We're worried you're gonna have another. We didn't want you to have a
that.
secondary stroke.
So I'm still mad at you. I'm not gonna say
Good, you should do that. All right, do you want to continue the special use permit, or are you gonna?
Who you ask?
Mr. Barton.
I'm not mad.
Trying to, Mr. Reed, do you want to continue it?
I'm not sure. When I say no, I don't know.
I think that continuing it would benefit us in 2 ways. One, it would give Mr. Schimpf an opportunity to consider, you know, modifications as it's proposed, and we would also have the benefit of Mr. Harvey's input.
Yeah, 5 feet.
And I think that those are 2 good things. I also think that if we were to go forward tonight, that it's possible that it hasn't had its fair hearing as it would be if Mr.
But it's
Harvey was
also
here.
possible it would be the right thing to do. It's not an easy call.
Yeah.
All right. I would like to get someone to entertain a motion to continue this to next month, the special use permit.
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have support?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Amanda?
Mr. Barton,
Stay.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes,
It was unanimous.
it was unanimous. Thank you, Skip. I'm tired. Any other business that needs to be presented at this time? All right, so next regular evening meeting. Now, for those in the audience, that means there's no public hearing on this subject. However, there will be a public comment section, so if you'd like to do that, it'd be the same exact thing. It's just not a public hearing. So make sure, remember how there's a public comment sign-up sheet? That's gonna be this one. At what time? And it will be in the afternoon, 2 o'clock.
Wait a minute.
Are we doing evening?
People have to work.
Which meeting? The 20, not the 28th.
The regular meeting.
Oh, regular.
Okay, regular.
All right,
Okay,
evening.
yeah, not the 28th.
Sold.
Well, people eventually have to work, so.
No, that's why I said 6 o'clock. Yeah. Or
6
7.
o'clock is
Seven.
7. Sorry.
usually the charge of this meeting, Mr.
I don't know anymore. 6, 7? This is our 6th permit. Let's do it. All right, we need a motion to adjourn, or do we have to continue?
We need to continue.
Wait, yeah, take it
Oh,
close
to the 28th.
That's the public.
Yes, that's what I was getting.
There we go. Mr. Reed.
I move that we adjourn to continue our meeting April 28th for the public hearing on proposed 2022 tax rate.
Do we have support?
Yes.
We have a second. Vote of acclamation, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank y'all. See y'all later.
We take these stage, but